The stars above Arkanis Prime shimmered with unnatural clarity the night the Council came. Commander Soran watched from the command tower as the orbital sensors began to fail, one after another, blinking out like dying embers in a firestorm. There had been no declaration, no warning, just a silent approach of Council warships cloaked in shadows, their hulls reflecting no light, their intentions masked behind diplomatic silence. Soran had served the Arkanis Defense Alliance for 2 decades. He had seen border skirmishes, trade disputes, even piracy. But this was different. These ships bore the insignia of peacekeepers, yet unleashed destruction with surgical precision. Kinetic strikes rained down on civilian zones, slicing into the Earth with seismic fury. Energy pulses obliterated orbital habitats. Screams filled the comms as defense grids overloaded and power failed across cities once vibrant with life. In Earth's lunar command station, Admiral Kalen Voss watched the incoming footage in silence. The feed was patchy, riddled with static, but clear enough to show the unmistakable symbol of the Galactic Council burned into the hulls of the attackers. Voss leaned forward, hands clenched behind his back, eyes fixed on the last transmission. A young Arkanis officer screaming into the camera, smoke rising behind her, before the image collapsed into black. They didn't even give him a chance to surrender, he muttered. President Elena Varga's voice came through from Geneva Command. We need confirmation, Kalen. The Council denies involvement. Voss turned to the intelligence officer beside him. Pull the SAT echoes. I want every particle trail analyzed. We'll prove it. Beneath the surface of politics, the truth always waited jagged and dark. Within hours, Earth's Intelligence Division decrypted emergency logs from Arkanis command stations. Weapon signatures matched Council armaments precisely. Tactical formations bore the hallmark of High Marshal Dravik's fleet. Once the diplomatic shield of the Council, now its executioner. A memorial was held 2 days later. 10,000 gathered beneath the lunar dome to mourn the dead. Refugee ships from Arkanis drifted in orbit, their hulls blackened and battered. Soran, barely alive, was pulled from the wreckage of his command tower by Earth medics. He had watched his planet burn. Now he spoke with a voice like gravel and ash. They came for silence, he told the assembly. They came not to conquer, but to erase. Admiral Voss stood beside him, his uniform solemn, shoulders heavy with a burden he had carried too many times. The Council's response was swift, bureaucratic, and cold, a public statement disavowing any military action, blaming splinter factions and communication failures. But the lie was too fragile. Earth's data cores had already spoken louder than any Council mouthpiece. Still, war was not declared, not yet. Voss returned to his command bunker beneath Mare Tranquillitatis and convened his war council. They expect us to hesitate, he said. They think Earth is still the sleeping world. They think diplomacy will hold us. What about the Accord? Asked Ambassador Lyra Chun, seated opposite him. If we retaliate without process. There was no process in Arkanis. Voss snapped, the edge in his voice surprising even himself. Lyra held his gaze. I know that, but war has a cost. If we answer fire with fire, we may lose more than we gain. They already decided what we're worth, Voss said, lowering his voice. We weren't just watching an atrocity. We were watching a warning. We're next. He left the meeting with his decision, unspoken but understood. That night, he visited the refugee decks on the station's lower levels. Children from Arkanis curled beneath thermal blankets, their eyes vacant. Soran sat quietly near the viewport, staring at the distant Earth. You're not here to offer comfort, Soran said. No, Voss replied. I'm here to ask what they feared. Soran turned. The flicker of starlight caught in the scar down his cheek. Hope. They feared we'd unite. That single word haunted Voss as he stood before the fleet later that night. Earth's warships, once built in the spirit of deterrence, now gleamed with cold purpose. The Orion-class destroyers lined the dark sky like silent sentinels. The engines of the lead vessel, indomitable, hummed with restrained fury. He addressed the fleet from the command deck. The Galactic Council has forgotten who we are. They struck at our allies without cause, without mercy, and they expect our silence. But we were born of resistance. From the ashes of old wars, we carved peace. Not because we were weak, but because we understood its value. Now that peace is shattered. The time for waiting has passed. The comms lit up with confirmation beacons from every ship in the task force. They were ready. Still, there was no grand declaration, no soaring music, just a cold, calculated hum of activation codes sinking across the fleet, and in the silence of deep space, the first engine trail shimmered into motion, cutting across the black. Earth was coming, and the stars would remember. The war room beneath Geneva hummed with restrained energy, its walls lined with tactical displays, and star charts pulsing in amber light. Admiral Kalen Voss stood at the head of the central table, a holographic projection of the galaxy rotating slowly before him. Behind the swirling lights of nebulas and star systems lay the black veins of conflict, council control routes, staging zones, hidden fleets. Earth's fate threaded through those veins now, taut as a wire. Voss's voice cut through the murmurs of the gathered command staff. Operation Starbrand is no longer hypothetical. We begin preparations tonight. Around him, murmurs ceased. General Amsel nodded grimly. Vice Admiral Celine tapped her datapad, dispatching encrypted orders to lunar shipyards. Every face was drawn, each officer understanding the weight of what this meant. Earth would no longer stand behind diplomacy. It would move. Lyra Chin stood silently near the periphery, her arms folded, lips pressed in. She fought to delay this moment, pleaded for restraint even as Arkanis burned. But the Council had sealed the path with their silence. And in the days since, more evidence had surfaced. Intercepted orders traced directly to the Council's high command, marked with the sigil of the Inner Assembly. The massacre had not been an accident. It had been doctrine. "I hope you understand what this becomes," Lyra said, her voice low but pointed. "This isn't justice. This is retribution." Voss met her gaze. "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in making sure this never happens again." Outside, Earth's orbital platforms came alive. The Indomitable, Earth's flagship, entered final refit. Railgun systems recalibrated, AI targeting updated with Arkanis battle data, plasma vents shielded for longer stealth runs. Alongside her, the Dauntless and Vigilant underwent simultaneous overhauls, each a testament to Earth's commitment to ending the Council's illusion of dominance. In Hangar Bay 4, Commander Soran walked the length of the Earth-designed Talon-class corvette, his boots echoing against the steel. Stripped of his old rank, his uniform now bore Earth's emblem, a stylized arc over a rising planet. He had volunteered without hesitation. Some viewed him as a relic of a lost world. Voss saw him as living memory, forged by fire and loss. "You're sure about this?" Voss asked, watching him from the railing above. Soran glanced up, his expression unreadable. "I died once on Arkanis. This is just the second half." They would strike not at the Council's seat, but at its foundation. The plan was precise. Hit relay stations, dismantle their surveillance net, expose internal fractures. Earth didn't have numbers, but it had speed, strategy, and rage. Task Force Nemesis, comprising 7 warships and 2 infiltration squads, became the spear tip. They would operate beyond Council sensors, using slipstream hops and dark space currents. Dangerous, unpredictable paths that only Earth's latest navigational AI dared chart. Each ship was a ghost, weapons charged, hulls painted black to devour starlight. Inside the Indomitable, the crew prepared with quiet intensity. Training simulations ran round the clock. Engineering teams bolted in alien tech salvaged from Arkanis. Cloaking matrices, power diffusers, data fragments Soran had smuggled off-world. The ghost of his world would give Earth an edge. But even as momentum built, dissent remained. At a late-night strategy review, Lyra confronted Voss again. "There is still a path to diplomacy," she insisted. "There are Council members who oppose what happened, who would speak for us." Voss turned from the display. "And how long before there's silence like the Arcani senators?" "Not all of them are Dravik, if we show restraint." "We've shown restraint for decades," Voss said, "and it left cities in ruins. What we're doing now isn't conquest, it's preservation." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She looked down at the projected star map, at the red zones flaring across it like wounds. Then softly, "Just promise me this ends with more than fire." Voss didn't promise. He couldn't. The truth was, part of him had already accepted the spiral. He had seen too much, lost too many under flags of peace that meant nothing when power was on the line. The night before departure, he walked alone to the ship's observation deck. Below, Earth spun in silence, clouds curling like breath over the oceans. He thought of the early years, when humanity first reached into the stars with wonder instead of fear. How quickly that wonder had curdled into strategy. Soran joined him, his stance stiff but thoughtful. "You know they'll call this Earth's empire moment," he said. Voss nodded. "Let them. We didn't start this." "No, but we'll decide how it ends." The signal came 2 hours before dawn. Encrypted, clean, untraceable. The Council had repositioned its fleet around Theta 7, a key logistics hub. Intelligence suggested High Marshal Dravik would be there within the cycle. It was the opportunity Voss had waited for. One strike. One message. Earth would not be broken into submission. Not quietly. Not at all. As engines flared and the task force rose from orbit, Lyra stood alone at the diplomatic wing, watching the lights disappear into space. She had fought to protect peace, and now she could only hope to salvage it from ruins. The stars whispered nothing as the fleet vanished into slipstream. Earth had spoken, and the Council was about to listen. The stars over Earth were still when the fleet returned. No celebration greeted them. No banners. Only the quiet breath of a planet that did not yet understand what had begun. The war had not officially started, but the line had been crossed, and no one on either side could pretend otherwise. In the lower decks of the Indomitable, Soran stood before a holodeck flickering with intercepted Council broadcasts. Debris still clung to his armor, dusted with carbon from Theta 7's shattered comm ring. But his eyes were sharp, haunted not with exhaustion but purpose. "They've begun mass conscription in the core worlds," said Admiral Voss, stepping beside him. "They're calling us insurgents. Terrorists." Soran didn't look up. "Let them name us what they need to. It won't change what we expose." In the days that followed, Earth disseminated the stolen data across neutral channels. Proof of the Council's order to annihilate Arkanis, of the strategic motivations cloaked behind lies. Systems once loyal to the Council hesitated. Some broke away entirely. A few sent emissaries in secret, curious about Earth's rising defiance. But the Council was not idle. Dravik's response was swift and brutal. Entire sectors were locked down. Starports closed. Communications blacked out. In shadowed corners of the galaxy, his black guard began silencing dissent. One by one, Allied outposts, those that dared shelter Arkanis refugees or echo Earth's message, went dark. Voss called a summit beneath the Martian ice domes, a gathering of surviving Arkanis leadership, Earth senior command, and delegates from outer colonies uncertain of their allegiance. The chamber was stark, the air cold, yet the tension within burned hotter than any star. "We can't win in a straight fight," said General Amsel. "Dravik's fleet outnumbers us 20-1. "Then we don't fight him in a line," Voss said. "We bleed him from within, disrupt his chain of command, turn his fear into fractures." Lyra chin stood then, returned from the fringes where diplomacy had crumbled. Her face was weary, but her presence still carried weight. "If we act without a future in mind," she said, "then we become a thing we claim to fight. Rage alone won't carry us through this. We need structure. We need a vision." Soran spoke next. "Arkanis was murdered because we trusted that the system would protect us. It didn't. We don't need a better system. We need a new one." The room fell silent. In the end, they agreed. Not on everything, but enough. A provisional alliance was drafted, Earth Arkanis, and 4 independent systems pledged their fleets and intelligence networks to a new coalition. The Free Systems Compact. Not a government. A resistance. Within days, their symbols began to replace Council insignias in rogue sectors. Quiet revolutions, not marked by gunfire, but by silence. Stations no longer responding to Dravik's orders. Flags lowered without fanfare. ships defecting in waves. Dravik responded with the full weight of his fury. It came in the form of the Eclipse Spear, a dreadnought the size of a city, built in secret along the outer rims. When it entered the orbit of Calvinar, a neutral world that had refused to extradite Arkanis survivors, it didn't demand surrender. It simply fired. The planet's surface cracked like glass. Ash filled the skies. Earth's task force arrived too late to save Calvinar, but not too late to engage. The battle in the Curious Belt became legend before it even ended. The Indomitable led the charge, flanked by the Dauntless and Vigilant, weaving through asteroid fields like wolves among ice. Fighters spilled from both sides, maneuvering between frozen rocks and fire. Every second counted. On the bridge, Voss gave precise commands, his voice never wavering. Target the dreadnought's port side Veneres. Overload its containment. Soran, now leading the ground-side infiltration unit aboard a commandeered cutter, struck from within. He and Markov carved through the belly of the beast, planting charges at weak points revealed by stolen Council blueprints. Inside the Eclipse Spear, chaos reigned. Dravik's men fought with the cold, desperate fury of those who believed they were invincible. But Earth's teams were relentless, focused. They didn't come for survival. They came for reckoning. When the final charge ignited, the dreadnought ruptured along its keel. Light poured from its heart like a dying star. Soran barely made it back to the extraction point. His left arm shattered, ribs cracked, but his voice was steady as he called for pickup. She's falling apart. I suggest we not wait around. The Eclipse Spear broke into 3 molten pieces, trailing fire into the vacuum as the Compact's fleet scattered into hyperspace, victorious, but bloodied. In the aftermath, Council forces hesitated. For the first time, fear touched their commanders. Earth, once considered a relic of idealism, had become the blade none of them saw coming. Weeks passed. Systems faltered under pressure. Insurgents rose. Council propaganda struggled to find purchase in worlds that now remembered the fire. Voss stood alone at the edge of a makeshift graveyard above Arkanis, a field of floating wreckage and tributes, where silence told stories that words couldn't. Soran joined him there, his arm in a cast, gaze fixed on the drifting remnants of home. You think we're winning? Soran asked. Voss took a long breath. I think we've remembered who we are. Above them, Earth's flag drifted on a buoy beacon, half-circle, rising star, and 3 streaks of light. Not empire, not vengeance. Hope earned in the fire, and still burning. You said, give title. The slipstream corridor spat the Indomitable into real space with a sudden jolt, a burst of distorted light rippling around her hull before collapsing into the void. Alarms quieted as stabilizers caught up, and within moments, the warship settled into silent glide near the outskirts of the Theta 7 system. Around her, the rest of Task Force Nemesis emerged one by one, flickers of quantum displacement giving way to sleek, deadly forms. Commander Soran watched from the bridge viewport, his eyes locked on the distant glimmer of the Theta 7 orbital station. It was larger than he'd expected, a sprawling lattice of solar arrays and sensor pylons cradling a massive logistical hub. Hundreds of Council ships came and went, most transport class, but a handful of cruisers orbited in sharp, defensive arcs. The center of the Council's resupply network throbbed like a beating heart. Target grid confirmed. Called Tactical Officer Lin from her console. 3 surveillance rings. Main station shielded. Fleet command ship here. A red beacon pulsed on the map. High Marshal Dravik's flagship, Vigilance Ascendant. Soran's jaw tightened. He remembered that name. It was a Vigilance Ascendant that had led the strike on Arkanis Prime, that had broken through planetary shields with ruthless precision. He could still see the fire trails, hear the scream of cities crushed beneath its shadow. Admiral Voss stepped forward, his voice calm and cold. This isn't a siege. We're here for disruption. In and out before they can mobilize their full response. We hit their supply AI core, disrupt communications, cripple the command ship, if we can. Then we vanish. Dravik? Asked Lin without looking up. If he burns with it, Voss said, we won't weep. Orders flowed like electricity. The Dauntless and Vigilant moved to flank positions, preparing to launch decoy drones and jammers. The Indomitable would lead the direct assault. Beneath their hulls, boarding pods were prepped, black cylinders packed with elite operatives trained for zero-G infiltration. Soran was among them. He had insisted on being in the first wave. "Are you sure you're field ready?" Voss had asked him hours earlier. Soran had answered with a single sentence. "I've waited for this since the fire took my sky." Now, in the narrow confines of the pod, Soran sat opposite Lieutenant Rhea Markov, Earthborn, sharp-eyed and steady. She studied him not with suspicion but curiosity. "They say you pulled 50 civilians out of collapsing substation," she said, sealing her harness. "I was the last officer left," he replied. "Didn't have the luxury of dying." The pod shuddered as it launched, silence giving way to a growing vibration. Outside, the stars twisted. Theta, 7 loomed larger, and behind its orbiting shadow, the Vigilance Ascendant awaited, massive, cruel, beautiful in a way of things built only to dominate. "Hard entry in 10 seconds, said Markov. Soran closed his eyes, saw Arkanis, and said nothing. The impact came like a hammer. The pod pierced the side of the Council's communications module, magnetic anchors biting down, plasma cutters shearing an entrance before the internal alarm systems could fully activate. Soran and his team poured through the breach, weapons ready, visors glowing blue. Resistance was immediate. Council guards, heavily augmented, fast, opened fire. The corridor became a flashpoint, energy bolts carving gouges in alloy plating. But Earth's soldiers were faster, smarter, coordinated by tactical AI that adapted with each second. Soran dropped 2 enemies with controlled shots, advancing through smoke and steel with cold efficiency. "We're reaching the primary node," Markov said, tapping into the access panel. Soran placed a charge. "They'll try to flood us with reinforcements. We move fast or we get buried." Minutes passed like heartbeats. Explosions rocked the station. Voss's voice cut in through comms, sharp with urgency. "Secondary fleet is mobilizing. They know we're not pirates. You've got 5 minutes." Markov finished her bypass. "Nodes open." Soran stepped forward, linked the Arkanis data spike into the core. For a brief, electric moment, Council systems screamed against the intrusion, then began to unravel. Maps flickered. Commands rewrote. Dozens of fleet movements, encrypted orders, and surveillance archives were copied into Earth's system in seconds. Then came the voice. "You always lacked imagination," said Dravik, his signal cutting across every channel like a blade. The image projected before them showed a man in black council regalia, tall and severe, face sharp as a weapon. He stood on the bridge of the Vigilance Ascendant, watching them through a direct feed. "Running won't save Earth," he said. "Retaliation will only hasten your extinction." Voss responded over the open line. "You already tried extinction." With the answer, Dravik's expression didn't change. "Then come, I welcome you to the end." He cut the transmission. From the viewport, Soran saw the Vigilance Ascendant pivot, its primary weapon arrays charging. "We don't have time," Markov said. Soran turned to her. "Yes, we do." He triggered the secondary detonation charges planted along the outer ring. The explosion rippled through the station, breaking apart the command relay and launching debris into the orbiting path of the Council ships. One transport collided with a fractured pylon and burst apart in flames. Chaos overtook the Council fleet as Earth's warships swept in with surgical strikes, carving through confusion. "Pull back," Voss ordered. "We've got what we need. We've made our point." The task force disengaged with precision. The Indomitable pulled Soran's pod in as they made the jump back into slipstream, the stars bending once more around their escape. And as Theta 7 vanished behind them, crippled and burning, Earth's message echoed to the fractured communications net they'd left in their wake. "We are not alone. We will not be broken. And this is only the beginning."